Hi everyone, thanks for joining in today. So my name is Professor Theo Lynn. I am Professor of Digital Business in DCU, and today I'm going to give you a quick overview of some of the research that we're doing on the healthy diet discourse on Twitter. This is a joint project with Pierangelo Rosati in DCU and Guto Leone and Patricia Endo in Brazil. And just for the sake of transparency, we're funded by SafeFood. So thank you very much, SafeFood. So today we're going to talk largely about influencers. And people talk about influencers quite a lot, and there's lots of definitions, but just for the sake of today, we're going to talk about people who have above average ability to informally influence the attitudes and behaviours of others in some kind of desired way. So there's some kind of motivation that they want to influence people. And it's a combination of different personal and social attributes that makes them an influencer. So they personify certain values. So it's who they are. They have some kind of competence, so they know something. So and then secondly, they're strategically located in a social nexus. So we can say that their influence is also derived by who they know, as the strength of all these things together which determine their communicative power. Now, obviously that's changed over time. So in the past, celebrities were our main influencers. And so when we were doing marketing, we would look for celebrities to endorse a particular product or behavior because people would see them a lot when they were on the radio or TV or whatever, okay? And largely we were influenced by these people because they were interesting, they were very attractive, and for a large amount of people, we wanted to be like them. So, their credibility came from the fact that they were attractive, or that we believed them to be trustworthy from our conceptions or perceptions of them in film or TV. And sometimes we think that they had some kind of expertise, or rather we projected expertise onto them. And, we watched George Clooney drinking espresso and we want to be like George Clooney, etc., etc. Now, we're all familiar with celebrities. We may not be as familiar with these people. So if you're a 12 to 15-year-old teenager, this is the hype house. So if you've got kids, they're probably using TikTok, and they'll be familiar with some of the characters in this picture. And these people are famous purely because of social media. Ellen DeGeneres is famous because she was on TV. George Clooney is famous from TV and films. These people are famous because they are on social media and they only use social media. If you've got smaller kids, you may be familiar with Norris Nuts. So this is a family in Australia, and there's 5 or 6 kids, and basically they're professional social influencers. Some of them are still in their nappies, but that's what they do. And these are influential because they're relatable. They look like us, they look like our kids. We can behave like them. We would like to behave like them. So not only are they interesting, they're relatable. And because they became famous through social media, or TikTok, or playing video games, a vast majority of people think, oh, that could be me too. So these people are not only relatable and interesting in a social influence kind of way, they also talk about food. So this character here is a guy called PewDiePie, who is one of the top gamers in the world, I suppose. And his big thing is, he lets you watch him play video games and he talks alongside it. And he caused a bit of a social media storm based on his eating habits. Purely this, he eats pizza from the inside out. So basically he cuts his slices in the middle of the pizza. And one thinks, really, how influential could this be? At this point in time, only one version of that has 8 million views. So he makes money out of pictures about his behavior in terms of eating pizza. Now, this is a man who makes $15 million a year being an influencer. So, this is big business. I think the most important thing to understand here is when consumers in the public, and particularly the younger public, look at these social media influencers, they do not equate them with marketing. They see them as cool, interesting, inspirational, relatable, but it's not being manipulative. And this is big business. So in the context of 2019, the estimated value of the social influence market is about 6.5 billion. So with that fame and fortune, people are going to see me and I'm going to make money. There's a lot of rivalry, there's a lot of competition to be a social media influencer, and obviously that attracts brands and marketers who want to capitalize on that, particularly brands who are less well known. So with that also comes targeted advertising, automation, the use of low-cost labor in developing countries, and black hat techniques, and bots, and other types of unethical practices, so that they can get more audience and therefore influence more people and also generate more revenue. So when it comes to food and health, it's not that different. So many of you may not be familiar with these two ladies. The lady on my left from your right is called Jess Anscoff, and the one on the right is Belle Gibson. Now, they're both Australian, and they've both built up very significant wellness influencer profiles based on advocating quite controversial and outdated therapies, things like the Jersen therapy. So, things that are saying, well, you should restrict certain types of foods, etc. And particularly in the case of both of these ladies, they were promoting these types of diets to cure cancer. Now, interestingly enough, Jess Anscoff died of cancer, and so it appeared that these diets didn't particularly help her in this case. And in the case of Belle Gibson, it turned out that it was fraud, so she never had cancer in the first place. And these people built mass amounts of influence in the market, but also generate quite a lot of revenue. So there are negative aspects of social influence, and those negative aspects have a specific impact on nutrition and health discourse. And we know from research, for instance, that social media health information, it just isn't subject to the same degree of filtering and quality control by professional gatekeepers as commercial or professional health sources. In the context of, for instance, the media, there's no editor sitting there and saying, no, you can't put that out because we can't stand over it. And there's no marketing manager looking at it saying, well, that's just blatantly untrue. And similarly, it's not necessarily backed by science. And the research tells us that health information is prone to being out of date and completely inaccurate on social media. Now, when it comes to nutrition and diet information in social media, while there isn't the same amount of research as in the context of other areas, we can also say in the research that has dealt with influencers, although it is with very small data sets, consistently it suggests that influencers are, one, inadequately qualified. So they're not necessarily qualified dietitians or nutritionists, etc. Two, they often present their opinion as fact. Okay. Three, their advice can be contrary to public health nutritional guidelines. And finally, we know that as they try to get more and more audience, they may use manipulative or deceptive marketing techniques. And this is a significant public health problem because these types of activities result in the general public either delaying or failing to seek some kind of health treatment or maybe some nutritional advice from a professional. They may result in malnutrition. Okay, so they may be involved in some kind of fad diet, etc., restricting or limiting different types of foods. And more importantly, it interferes with sound nutrition education and public health. So basically, the job of the public health sector is made more difficult due to the confusion and clutter in the marketplace. And people are influenced not just by what we know as social influencers, the Kim Kardashians, etc. They're influenced by their everyday influencers, which is their friends and their peers and their family, etc. Micro influencers who may only have 1,000 followers, or they may have 50,000 followers. And then there's celebrities. But then on top of that, what you have is celebrities who are pure social media celebrities, like the ones that we've just talked about, Norris Nuts and Hype House. And then you've got celebrities who were celebrities from traditional media. So the Kim Kardashians of this world, or, Goop, or whatever flavor of weirdness that you want to deal with today. Now, when we talk to safe food, we thought it'd be very interesting to start looking at, who are the most influential users in the healthy diet discourse on Twitter? Now, we focus on healthy diet because, research again says that the idea of healthy diet, it has changed over time, and it's heavily influenced by your individual context and your demographics, your historical and cultural context, and who's promoting it. So we were quite interested in that type of concept. So we looked at English language tweets that focused on, had the words healthy diet in their text, or they had the hashtag healthy diet. And then the second thing we wanted to do was focus on much larger data sets. So as I said earlier on, a lot of the research in this area are very small data sets, typically manually coded. So we decided that we would focus on very large data sets. So our data set is in the millions of pieces of content and well over 650,000 or 630,000 users. The third thing we wanted to focus on was people and topics. So the first thing we want to say, who are the most influential users in the health diet discourse? And then the second thing we wanted to focus on is, well, what do they discuss? And we want to do that over a sustained period, not just 1 month, which is typically what a lot of the studies look at. So we decided to look at it for 16 months. So that's 1 year, and then an additional 4 months so that we could actually see, could we generalize our findings? And the third thing that we decided to look at was whether we could train a deep learning model. And deep learning is a kind of a form of what most people are calling artificial intelligence at this stage. So we want to train a machine to recognize whether a Twitter user was high or low quality based on their profile, and whether their content was high or low quality. So that's the kind of project that we decided to embark on. And to be clear, these are just some preliminary findings, and we can send the paper to you in a couple of weeks when we finish it. So just in terms of the data, we're looking at historic data. We have a license from Twitter, so we get just, between 100 and 150 pieces of data for each tweet. So the Twitter data set is made up of just about 1.2 million tweets, English language only, all over the world. And it's from January 2018 to April 2019. And it comprises retweets and replies, and we're going to do some research on that in the future, looking at what kind of content gets amplified more. And it includes verified users, who are people who have submitted their credentials to Twitter, and Twitter has verified who they are. And it includes a whole variety of other people. Now, very importantly, the power rule applies here. So 80% of those 630,000 odd users only posted one tweet. So sorry, what we're saying there is, in respect of this particular data set, there are really influencers and followers. There are people who tweet a lot, and then there's people who tweet once. Okay, so and that's reflective of the wider discussion on Twitter. So that's the data set. And when we look at the analysis of who the most influential users are, what we immediately see is there's two ways of looking at this. So there's the most active users, and the most active users are largely not verified. So what we can tell you about them is let's see, if I take the top 15 there, of the top 15, only one is verified. And when I say verified, it's the company behind the South Beach diet. So it's verified. I'm not necessarily saying it's the highest quality in the world. We can say universally 13 out of 15, so nearly overwhelming the majority of the top 15, all use either bots or some kind of automated software or very advanced techniques to manipulate content and their audience. And that's a significant issue. So when we look at a large proportion of the most active users, a lot of it is what we would determine as spam, okay? Now, when we look at the most visible users, so these are the people reshare or interact with the most, we find that a lot more visible accounts are verified. However, they are not as active by a massive factorial. And actually what they talk about is not normally nutrition and diet. So actually they only talk about nutrition and diet at a very small level. So the first thing that we can look at there is where, people are talking, and some of those people are robots. So the computer as an actor is a very big theme in this. And really, when we think about public health information, we're not just trying to get a message across in noise being created by other users, but by being created by manipulative users that are machine-generated content machines. So that's a significant problem in itself. If we drill down a bit further there and talk about topics, what we find is if we split the populations into all the tweets and then just look at the verified tweets, what we find is that there is a difference in the topics that are being discussed and the weighting of those topics. So here we're using a thing called the linguistic inquiry word count, which is often used for health research. We've taken 3 dictionaries, health, the ingestion dictionary, and the body dictionary. And so what we see here is, unsurprisingly, people are talking about diet, and this is independent of having the phrase healthy diet in the actual content. They're talking about the relationship between diet and health. Okay, so that's consistent. But then when you look at the priorities placed for a verified audience versus the general audience, you see that exercise and fitness and nutrition are much higher ranked than life, living, lifestyle, etc. Whereas in the general population, which is influenced by the commercial providers, what you see is more emphasis on fats. You see more emphasis on diseases. Now, it is not overly surprising that we would see a discourse around diabetes, diet, exercise in the context of this discussion. However, when you drill down into the actual content more, what you find is the use of marketing appeals linking a particular diet or nutrition behavior with a better quality of living or better lifestyle. And so the big difference between, say, a public health message and the verified user messages will be around the more influencer marketing type messaging tends to focus on body image. It tends to focus on being beautiful. It tends on having a better quality of life, living life more. And frankly, it's much more fun and exciting than the verified accounts and the public information messaging. And so when we move through these discussions, for instance, we see again, when we talk about really the act of ingesting, what do we see? We see, okay, diet is the same, it's the same type of levels, but then you get down to the specific content. Verified users tend to talk more about food instead of the act of eating, okay? Talk about weight instead of fats, okay? And so again, we see a big difference in some of the types of content that's being discussed. And similarly with body, in the context of body, the general audience talk about body more, whereas in the context of the verified users, they're talking about very specific diseases that result from poor nutrition or diet, heart, etc. So we see slight variances in that. Now, one of the tables that's not on this slide relates to spam. If we take the spam accounts out, we find actually the general audience have very similar discourse to the verified users. So what we're saying is, well, actually, there's a vast amount of accounts there that are trying to manipulate the discussion, and they're the problem more than the influencers, but they could be classified as influencers too. We also looked at popular diets. I don't necessarily want to call them fad diets because I'm not a nutritionist. But what you find is popular diets are not as prominent as we imagined. They're primarily promoted by relatively low quality accounts, and they focus around 2 clusters. So there's a kind of a big cluster around low carb and carb free, and keto diets, etc., and then another one around vegan and vegetarian things. And again, the big issue there is how do you counter these messages? So that's a big challenge, particularly in 140 to 280 characters. So when you're looking at even something there like keto or ketogenic diets, you're talking about tens of thousands of tweets, you know, so that's what you're up against. So again, a big focus on trends. Now, obviously, there's a lot of research that can be done by saying, what are the trends in this data? Where is it going? But we're not looking at that today. Finally, just to talk about our deep learning model, what deep learning involves is a very complex mathematical model that learns from the data. So what we did was we had 3 coders, 3 people who had studied nutrition, and we asked them to rate biographies of Twitter users as high quality or low quality in terms of qualifications, based on what they read. Now that's really important. It's not based on the organization, just what they read in the bio. And then the second thing was to rate the content in terms of its quality in terms of nutritional information. And then we sent the training set to the machine, and we trained this model on that training set. And then we asked it to classify the rest of the data. And what we find is that the deep learning models are quite accurate. So you can see there's 87, 88% accuracy, much more accurate than humans. And they're both sensitive and they're specific. So they successfully identify false negatives, true positives, false positives, and false negatives, okay? So actually the answer to that question is deep learning is very effective for identifying high quality and low quality nutrition and diet information. Unfortunately, it suggests that, well, 96% or so of the biographies are low quality profiles and 79% of the content is low quality information. And some of the difficulty there is that some organizations, like the World Health Organization, come across as being low quality, even though we know that they're high quality. And again, the problem there is not really presenting those kind of credentials to the audience. You know, so part of this is, who is this? It's the World Health Organization. Well, am I getting nutritional advice from them? I thought they dealt with COVID-19. You know, so again, same with content. There might not necessarily be the content that the audience is looking for. So what does this mean to you? Well, at this point in time, here's some preliminary takeaways. So some high-level takeaways. First of all, I think we need activity and visibility. And what do I mean by that is, one of the problems in the discourse and the role that nutritionists and dietitians, the public health information professionals have, is probably not being as active as that you need to be and not being as visible as you need to be. Then the second thing is your bios and your content is frankly just not interesting, relatable, or credible. The way it's presented to this particular audience and the social media audience. So what we need to do is think about how can we make this content more related to their life and their lifestyle while being credible and being interesting and fun and relatable, but at the same time being very targeted, okay? The third part is we need to be coordinated and sophisticated. So if you want to compete for share of voice on social media, and ideally trend on social media, you need not only to coordinate within your organizations, but you need to coordinate within other organizations so that you're getting your message amplified, and that together that you're retweeting and resharing and using the techniques that these organizations are using to get impact in your organizations and in your sector. And that's a global and local discussion, because consumers are consuming global content and they're participating in global discourse in Ireland. They're applying it in a local context, but they're having this global discussion, and you need to coordinate and be part of that global discussion too. And some of this revolves around and involves policing and monitoring by platforms, the Facebooks and the Twitters and the TikToks and the Instagrams, and policymakers. So for instance, counteracting and combating bad actors, misinformation, deceptive behavior, that requires intervention by platforms and policymakers. You know, this is a public health risk. And you know, my last point, maybe my final thing is, I'm not sure I'm that optimistic, because when I see what's going on right now in the US, etc., and particularly this quote from Mark Zuckerberg, you know, I just believe strongly that Facebook shouldn't be the arbiter of truth of everything that people say online. In general, private companies probably shouldn't be especially these platform companies, they should be in a position of saying, basically, this is false information. This may damage your health. And that's the fundamental issue here, is that when you have a platform where people can share content, and they're entitled to their freedom of expression, but when that content is prone to be out of date, and it's prone to be inaccurate, and there are no gatekeepers, and it may result in an adverse health impact, then I think that there's a requirement by platforms, policymakers to step in. So thanks for listening. Apologies if I've gone over time. This is obviously a new way of delivering content, and I'm open to questions. Thank you very much.